Hey guys, it's Ernesto Sue. Welcome back to another Monday Critique. I hope you guys are having a great Monday. I am having a fantastic Monday. We have two great images to critique today, and I cannot wait to jump straight into these images. So, I'll see you guys after this intro. If you guys want to submit your image to be critiqued, please join our Facebook group. It's called Fine Art Photography and Modeling. In that group, I created a specific thread where you could submit your images to be critiqued. Welcome back, guys. Let's jump into this image submitted by this gentleman. His nickname is Max. He's based out in Bangkok. Max has been in photography for about 6 months. Now, if I had to compare Max's photography to my photography when I first got into photography, 6 months into it, Max's photography would beat me by a landslide. So Max, you are doing a fantastic job. Keep it up. All right, so let's jump straight into the lighting conditions in this image. So now we have a beautiful young lady here. Now, typically I wouldn't suggest lighting a subject in this fashion. So in this image, we have a young lady here that's being broad lit. Now, typically you don't want to broad light someone. Now, what does broad lighting mean? Broad lighting means as if, like right now, I'm facing the camera, right? My light source is coming from camera left, right? So right now I'm being lit on this side of the face, okay? This side of the face should be in shadow. So from a camera perspective, you want to shoot me on the shadow side of the face. You don't want to shoot me when I turn my face in this fashion where the light is hitting my face and now you're shooting me on the broad side of the face. The broad side of the face, that means just the light is hitting me on this side of the face. So that makes my face appears a little bit fuller. Now, if you shoot me on this side of the face, now my face is a little bit chiseled and add a little bit more depth and dimension to the image. Now, I'm not really sure how that looks on the camera per se, but I think you got the gist of what I'm trying to say. You don't want to shoot someone on the broad side of the face where the lightest source is coming from. You always want to change your camera position to the shadow side of the face and shoot someone from that side of the face. Now, in this image, we have a young lady that's being broad lit. Now, this young lady is a very beautiful young lady. So you could pretty much shoot her from any position. You could shoot her from the broad side of the face or the shadow side of the face. It really doesn't matter with this young lady. And you could tell because her jawline pretty much forgives that shot very easily. So with respect to her face and the lighting, I don't have any issues because this young lady have a very forgiving jawline, and like I said, you could shoot her or photograph her from any direction and it will be perfectly fine. However, if you look at her stomach and if you look at how the light is hitting her stomach, you will notice that her stomach appears to be a little bit fuller than it needs to be. I'm pretty sure this young lady is very slim, but the light and how it's hitting her stomach makes it appear fuller than it needs to be. So that's what happens when you are broad lighting someone and you don't pay attention to where the shadow is falling. When you're broad lighting someone, you make objects appear a little bit fuller than it needs to be. So that is the only thing that I would suggest when photographing people. Just pay close attention to where the light is falling and the shadow appears. All right, guys, let's jump straight into the pose. So from a posing perspective, what we have here is more of a lifestyle type of pose, and I really don't have much of an issue with it. It's fine. I love the expression on her face. and if she was selling ice cream, I would buy it. So good job with that. All right, guys, let's jump straight into the composition in this image. Now, I love what's going on here. I love the depth of field that he chose for this image, because we have a lot of distracting elements in the background, and pushing those items out of focus was a great choice. The one thing that I wish that could have been done in camera was applying a little bit of the rule of thirds to this image. Right now, she's very centered in the image, and I wish she was just a little bit off-centered and cropped in this fashion. And I think if it was cropped in this fashion just a little bit, where she's a little bit off-centered, it would have helped add a little bit more interest to the shot. Not that the shot is not already interesting, I just think it would have added just a little bit more to it. And that's all I have to add with respect to the composition. So great job with that. All right, guys, let's move on to image number 2. This image was submitted by this gentleman. Thank you very much, Chris. I appreciate it. Now, Chris is a local photographer here in Raleigh. Chris has assisted me on multiple shoots before. So once again, thank you very much, Chris, for all your help. I appreciate it. You're awesome. Thank you. All right, so now let's dive straight into this image. The first thing we're gonna start with is lighting. Lighting is very important. Now, when Chris submitted this image, he did mention that he used artificial light to help light this young lady. Now, the strobe was on camera left of the young lady. So when working with ambient light and strobes, the very first thing that you want to do is use your camera and the camera meter in your camera to help expose for the background. The first thing you want to always do is make sure that you get the ambient light situation under control. Because why use artificial light if you can't get the background under control? You don't want to overexpose background, right? Unless that's what you're going for. If you're going for that, then don't use strobes, you know? But if you wanted to get a very balanced photo, what you want to do is expose for the background and then utilize the strobe. Now, Chris did an awesome job with balancing the ambient light with the strobe. If you look at the subject is not overly exposed. So awesome job with that, Chris. Another thing that he did, if you look at the image, he also photographed the subject from the shadow side of the face, which add more depth and dimension to this image. So from that perspective, great job. Now let's look at one item in this image that's just a little bit distracting. And that's the highlight that's on her chest. Now, there's a couple of ways that this could have been addressed while the image was being created. And is really simple. And that is moving the subject back, moving the subject to the left, or moving the subject forward. Or lastly, utilizing the diffuser or a reflector that just put it in between the light and that subject, and that would help either diffuse that light with the diffuser or block that light with the reflector. So those are a couple of ways that you could fix that little distraction from a lighting perspective on the subject. But over and above that, I don't have really much to add with respect to the lighting. So overall, awesome job with the lighting, Chris. All right, guys, now let's move on to the posing in this image. So now let's talk about a couple of things that I really like that's going on in this image. First of all, I love the fact that Chris had the subject bend her elbow just a little bit. That is fantastic. Another thing that I love that's going on in this image is the little bending of her knee. I think that is phenomenal. Great job with that. Now, here's a couple of things that I would love to correct in this image to enhance it just a little bit more, okay? The first thing I would like to talk about is the hand. If you look at our right hands, especially when you're working with females, not males so much, but mostly females, okay? You don't want to photograph the back of a female's hands, because when you photograph the back of the female hands, that just becomes a large surface, and her back of her hands just makes her hands appear larger than it should be, okay? So what you want to do is photograph this part of the hands. So always have the female turn her hands in this fashion to the camera and not like this, okay? Obviously, there's always context to everything. So if there's a situation where it calls for putting the hands in this fashion to the camera, then do it, obviously. But in most situations, especially when dealing with portraits, you don't want to have the female subject put their hands like this to the camera. So that would be my only suggestion there. The other thing that I would like to talk about is her position to the camera. Now, I'm going to utilize the example that we just talked about, which is the hands, to illustrate my point about her position to the camera, okay? Now, like before, her hands is like this, and her body right now is like this to the camera, okay? My suggestion, if I was working with this female subject, the first thing I would have her do is, as opposed to having her body in this fashion to the camera, which, like I said, if you have her body in this way to the camera, you are showing the largest surface in that image. So what you want to have her do is turn her body away from the camera. That's the first thing that I would have done if I was shooting this subject. Then I would have her bend her right knee, similar to how you did it, Chris. I would have her bend her right knee, okay? That would be the second thing that I would have done. The third thing that I would have done is I would have had her push her lower portion of her body away from the camera. Then I would have her push her upper body towards the camera and towards the light source. So with regards to perspective, as you know, when you have a item that's close to the camera, that item appears largest when it's closest to the camera. When you push that item away from the camera, now that item becomes smaller as opposed to bigger. So that's the logic there. If you push her lower portion of her body away from the camera, that lower portion of her body now becomes smaller. And if you push her face towards the camera and her face towards the light source, now her face / her head becomes the largest part of that image, and the first thing that people would connect to, which is her face, right? Right now, when I look at this image, the first thing I connect to is the lower portion of her body. So that will be the only couple of things that I would suggest to enhance this pose. Now let's move on to the composition in this image. From a compositional perspective, overall, I think you did a pretty good job with the composition. Here's a couple of things that I would have adjusted in this image to help just a little bit. Now, I mentioned in a previous video that location does not matter, and it really doesn't. The only thing that matters is really the light. However, you also have to make sure that you choose the right focal length to help with any distracting elements in the shot. Now, when I look at this image, there's certain distracting elements in this shot that could have been eliminated with the choice of the proper focal length. For example, I know that you shot this image at 80. Perhaps if you racked it out to like 200, because I know you were shooting with a 70-200 lens, if you'd have racked it out to 200, I think it would have helped blow out that background just a little bit more so that those distracting elements were not as visible. And the distracting elements that I'm referring to in this image would be like the cars in the background. Those things are just a little bit distracted in this shot. And I think if you were to go to like 200 on your lens, it would help with pushing those elements out of focus just a little bit more. Now, another thing that I would have done with this particular image is push her to the right or the left frame of this image. By utilizing your rule of thirds, that would help add a little bit more interest in this shot. And also, if you look at the top part of the frame, the sky is not really offering much to this shot. So I would have tried to eliminate that sky as much as possible. Now, if it had some clouds or something like that, I would understand keeping it in the shot. But right now, there's just no interest. There's no clouds, anything. So my suggestion would have been to crop that out or try to eliminate it as much as possible. So those would have been a couple of things that I would have done from a compositional perspective to help with this image. I hope that was helpful. All right, guys, now let's get on to the rating of these two images. The first images on deck is Max. Light. This image received a rating of 3. Pose. This image received a rating of 4. Composition. This image received a rating of 3. Overall, this image received a rating of 3.33 out of 5. So now let's move on to Chris' image. Light. This image received a rating of 4. Pose. This image received a rating of 3. Composition. This image received a rating of 2. Overall, this image received a rating of 3 out of 5. All right, guys. Thank you very much for submitting your images. I sincerely appreciate it. I hope you guys got a lot of information from it. I hope it was helpful to you, and I hope it was helpful to the viewers. So again, thank you very much for submitting your images. Look, I don't want you to think that this was easy. This was not easy. These two images were pretty awesome. So thank you very much again. I cannot express how much I appreciate you guys submitting your images for me to critique. Please continue to submit those images and I will continue to critique. So thank you again. That is it. Thank you very much for watching this video, guys. If you enjoyed it, hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with your friends and family. And please put some feedback down below and let me know what you think about this video. And guys, if you got this far in the video, you must be enjoying this content and you must be enjoying this channel. So go ahead, hit that subscribe button, and I'll see you next Monday.